Hi and welcome to this week's Wu Wei Wisdom Life Lessons teaching. It's great to be back with you all. Today we are talking about the deeply personal yet universal topic of honoring your authentic self or your true self or spiritual self, and why this is so important so that you can live a life of integrity and reach your greatest potential. Okay, David, so let's start with some definitions. What is the authentic self, true self, or spiritual self from a Wu Wei Wisdom or a Taoist perspective?
This is such an important subject in our model, Alex, because this makes our model slightly different to other models. So we're trying to find the balance, Wu Wei. That's what Wu Wei means, in your flow. And we're trying to find the balance between, again, it's different words and different meanings that you want to put on it. The physical human self and something we can't grasp, something we know is there, but I can't hold up our spirituality. But we're trying to find the balance between those two, the Wu Wei. And the Taoists describe this as yin and yang. So inside of us all, we have a yin and a yang. We have the human self, the physical self, and the spiritual self. And the Wu Wei is trying to bring those two together in a balance. So sometimes we would want to be more physical in the day-to-day life, doing the housework. Although, to be honest, you could be more spiritual, but that's always moving and that's always flowing. And so the authenticity that you're talking about is when that is synchronized, when we're in that sweet spot, and getting used to knowing when we're in that sweet spot.
Okay, because, so for example, you talk about the yin and yang, so the human energy, the human side of us, our physicality, our cognition, our brain, our ego is the yang.
Yes.
And our yin is the spiritual part of us, what the Taoists call the Shen, which is this thing that we can't see or grasp, but we all have a sense that it's there in the form of our intuition, our gut feeling, our inner knowing.
Yes, and the Taoist teaching and our teaching is, although that can't be seen, it's as important as the physical self. And so what a lot of us does, and when the inner child comes into play, the inner child is more on the yang side.
Yeah.
I want it now. I want it the way I want it. It should be this way. See, that's all yang. People should act in this way. I want to control the future. I want to know what's going to happen. Where the spiritual side saying, we're in the flow. We don't know the future. We'll never know the future. We have to live in the unknown. And so we have to balance those two up. And again, we talk a lot, don't we, about the pendulum. We can't be too far one way, and we certainly can't be too far the other way, because we do live in a physical world. So we can't be too much in our spirituality. And so all the time, this pendulum, this path is flowing. And if you look at the sign of yin and yang, you'll see that center line. And that's Wu Wei. That's being in your flow, being aware of this and being able to adjust appropriately.
Yeah, so as you say, our authenticity while we're in human form, having this human experience, having this wonderful human journey, is the appropriate harmonious balance between our human energy and our spiritual energy, our Shen. And living authentically means navigating through life in that correct balance. So not in a way that our ego or our inner child desires and fears is always dominating, but equally, unless we're, a monk living in a remote mountaintop, we also can't live entirely through our Shen spirituality, because then, in a way, we are then also missing out the experience of our humanness.
The best way to describe this is when you see something that's natural and normal, like a beautiful sunrise or a sunset, you could say, well, that's in the physical world. You're right, it is. But as you watch the sun rising or the sunset, or you go for a beautiful walk in nature, you go through the forest, you say, well, the forest is real, I can touch the trees. You can, that's true. but you're just missing out if you're just touching the trees. There is a spirituality of hearing the grass, seeing the animals, being part of nature, and finding that balance is Wu Wei, being able to experience walking in the forest, seeing a sunset, standing by a waterfall. I can remember once in China, standing by a waterfall and actually experiencing the power of the water. Even though the water was quite away, you could almost sense the power of the water, and just standing there in a kind of meditative state and experiencing the physicality of the water and the waterfall, but also experiencing what that does for me on a spiritual level.
Yeah.
And I think for a lot of, say, mothers, for instance, when they give birth to a child, they have the physicality. It always amazes me because I've been very fortunate as a Chinese medicine doctor to be at about, I think we counted it once, 35 births, and seeing the mother going through extraordinary pain that I can't imagine how they do it. Yet the child comes out, and in that instant, Alex, there's a spirituality. Yeah. When the child is put on the mother's breasts, there's something that transcends the physical pain. And it always amazes me that mothers want to go back and have another one, because I don't know how they do it. And there's the balance between the yang, the physicality, the reality of life, yet there's something that we can't touch, that we can't hold on to. Yet we can sense it. I could sense it, and I wasn't the father. And I could see the parents in that moment experience spirituality.
And so, David, what you've talked about there is the spiritual side of us when in balance with our human energy and we're all living authentically, we're in full appreciation. Having that awareness enriches our life. You've talked about experiences there which enrich our life experience in a positive way. But a big part of the being deeply connected to our spirituality, our true self, or being authentic, is that inner part of us, so not our ego, also is a positive guiding force. It's a wise guide to help us navigate through life, so that if we're connected to that, we're less likely to be led by our ego fears, our ego desires down a path of temporary fulfillment, but not deeply satisfying fulfillment. We're less likely to make inauthentic choices. We're less likely to get ourselves in problem situations, or we are more able to cope with challenges in an authentic, creative and resourceful way if we hold that connection to our authenticity, to our spiritual self, to our wise inner guide being very important.
Yes, so in our model, and the ones we deal with the most is what we call the inner child, because the inner child has a direct connection to our emotions, our physical emotions, and those physical emotions are real, and we acknowledge them. We're not saying you shouldn't have emotions. We're not saying emotions are evil. I'm saying the opposite. Emotions are wonderful. But there's something else going on. And for many of my clients, they're so tuned in to their emotions. The whole life is based on what they feel. They will tell me, I feel this, I feel that, I feel like I can't cope, I feel like I'm not good enough, I feel like it's... Well, these are just feelings. They're not even true. There's no feeling called I'm not good enough. That's a belief. And the feeling then corrupts the belief, and it kind of swings the pendulum away from the spirituality. So we lose that connection with the Shen. We're not tuned into the Shen. We're tuned into this loud noise of our emotions. And of course, what happens is it takes us down a path that we're never satisfied. And again, I got this image. I always have this image of the donkey and the carrot. We're always searching for something. We're searching for validation. We're searching for people to acknowledge us. We're searching to people to stroke us and to say we're good boys, or we're good girls, or we've done well, or we're superior. And of course, we're never satisfied. But what's more important for me is that path that I'm trying to guide you back is a path away from your spirituality. You become more and more isolated. You become like the donkey, always wanting to strive. There's always something better. There's always another person. There's always another job. Oh, if I got another car. Oh, if I just lost £3. Oh, if we moved house. Oh, if I got another husband or another wife. Things would be better, wouldn't they? Well, no, of course they won't be better, because the only way that you can find harmony is to come back and to realize your Shen. It's very challenging because the inner child and the emotions are so real of the human world and the spirituality. That's why I recommend finding a practice such as meditation or listening to our videos or reading or journaling that connects you back to this unique balance.
And David, I think it's true to say that in the same way that we can recognize when we are being led or guided, say, by our ego or inner child, we know that because we're experiencing red light emotions, so what we would call stress, anxiety, fear, anger, repulsion, guilt, all the negative emotions, they are usually really good indicators that there's some misaligned, ego-led, inner child-led thinking going on. But equally, if we ask the question, well, how do I know when I'm connected and being guided more by my Shen or my spirituality, when I'm more in my authentic energy? The physiological feelings and emotions are also a good guide, because we experience what we would call green light feelings of calm, inner peace.
Love. That's the most important. So one of the this is why when people write in and say, oh, your teaching says ignore emotions. My teaching does not say ignore emotions. It says to understand emotions. Because what you're just explaining, when you are connected to Shen, your spirituality, those emotions of peace, compassion, kindness, love, the ability to adapt, the ability of flexibility, the ability of resilience, the ability to bounce back, the ability to take a blow and come back stronger. This is when you're more connected to your Shen, to the essence of who you are. You were born with this. This is your birthright. This is the idea that the inner child gives you. I'm not worthy. The 3 lies, we call it. I'm not good enough. Doesn't even make sense. Not good enough for what? Whom? Who's saying that? I can't cope. When you've coped all your life, I'm not lovable. I'm unworthy. You see, these are the propaganda that the inner child gives you, and we believe them. People say to me every day, my clients say to me, oh, the problem is I'm not good enough. And when I say to them, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Could you explain that to me? And then it normally ends up, when we've done the golden thread, it's what they perceive their parents think. But even if their parents thought that, even, which is very rare, but let's say you have parents that look at a child and says, this child is not good enough for me. Does that make the child not good enough? Now, the child will believe it, as obviously, because in that childhood experience, their parents are God. But when we developed, when we understand our Shen, when we understand the power of our Shen, we can then attribute it that this is their parents and their problems. It's not our problems. Our parents' problems don't have to be our problems. And we can start, as you said in your introduction, this is very important words, to respect ourselves, to honor ourselves, to reconnect with ourselves. Our Shen doesn't go away and leave us. Nobody can take it away from us. Nobody can take our worth away from us or give us more worth. Somebody could get at your feet and kiss your feet and say, oh my God, you're so wonderful, you're so brilliant, you are the best as in the world. It doesn't give you more worth.
Yeah, and I think, David, that, as you say, that Shen spiritual energy, that part of ourselves, our ability and our calling to be authentic is always there, is always waiting quietly for us to reconnect. it's then this comes down to the point of self-responsibility and accountability.
Yes.
And you talk about this idea of a spiritual contract.
Yes.
Do you want to explain that a little bit more?
Well, I believe we're born, and again, my mission as a Taoist monk is to try and make the Taoist teachings accessible. So when we're born, when we come into this world, in this physical world, we come in with this spiritual nature. And again, if you've ever been lucky enough to be in a delivery room and seeing the birth of a child, maybe your child, there's something different going on there. And as I say, I've been at 35 births, not my children. I've been at my own children's birth, but I've been at other people. And I too can sense this through the pain, through the anguish, through the squealing and the crying and the father upset, the mother tears and pain and effort coming down. When that baby enters the room, still attached to the umbilical cord, there's something different happens. A spirituality and a sense of calmness. Even though the mother may still be in pain, physical pain, the sense of calmness overrides that. And now that instance is what I would call a spiritual contract. It's our birthright. This is who we are. We don't have to learn this. Nobody can give it to us, because if we didn't have it, do you think we would force our way down that birth canal? Do you think our head, have you ever seen a birth, how the head goes like this, comes out of that space? And this is the intention. This is the chi. This is the energy of who we are. This is you. You have made that journey and you have that contract. Now, when you choose as you get older and things don't go the way that you want them to, and perhaps your childhood experiences, I acknowledge, wasn't good, could have been better, other people's experiences were better than yours. I acknowledge all of that. I'm not saying that's not true, but I'm saying that that's your interpretation, and that happened. But the one thing that you don't break, and that's why I call it a contract, because you can't break this contract, is that spiritual contract. That spirituality doesn't go away because you haven't connected to it. I'm working with clients in their 60s and 70s, and you can reconnect to it. You've always known it's there. And so it's swinging the pendulum back. And how do you swing the pendulum back? With truth, honesty, and integrity. And there's the contract. You don't lie to yourself. You don't allow yourself to say things like, I'm not good enough, if you can't back it up. So what's your kind of back up to I'm not good enough? And it will always end up, well, somebody said it. So right away, you're breaking your contract, because you're saying what they say is more important than what I know.
I mean, David, if we have an intention, okay, so we find ourselves in a position where we can see that our life is being guided by wanting to prove ourselves, being a perfectionist, seeking external validation, trappings of wealth and success, which actually deep down feel quite hollow. We still are experiencing red light feelings because we're not aligned with our spirituality. We're not being authentic. If we want to turn things around, and if we have the intention, I actually want to live a more authentic life, I guess it's easier to be more authentic when times are easy and good, but it's very difficult, or certainly more challenging, to be authentic, stand up for our authenticity, for our true values, when we're under pressure or when we're under stress, or if we still have a lingering fears of what other people are going to say, other people are going to criticize us, other people are going to judge us. How do we be authentic? How do we be guided by our spirituality in terms of our life choices, our actions, our decisions, when we're actually facing real world pressures and real world judgments?
So to answer your question directly, when we're going through challenging times, which we will, and Taoism doesn't say life is going to be perfect and everything is going to flow the way that you want it. It says the opposite. You hear me in these teachings refer to a river. And life is like a river. It has calm, peaceful, nice times, and it has waterfalls and rapids. It might have a few crocodiles in there, and we have to learn to navigate the river. And then when your explanation, when we're going through a difficult time, and then you did something very interesting, you then introduced emotions. When we fear, and there's the inner child. So the inner child recognizes that we're going through a challenging time. It doesn't know how to cope. It's crying out for help. It's crying out for a guardian angel to come in and magically make this right. What does it do? It creates strong, intense emotions, fear, anxiety. All of these is the inner child saying, I want a way out of this. I want a quick fix. I want to know this is going to go away. In fact, I want it to go away today. I don't want to deal with this. And we then have to be able to, we call it reparenting. We have to be able to step in and first of all, reassure our inner child that we will cope. We have always coped. We are a coping machine. We will come through this. And the first step is not to create a separation, an internal fight and struggle like a tug of war. The first step is to learn, and this is what the challenge is telling us, is to come together in yin and yang, in Wu Wei. So this is why the teaching of yin yang, and perhaps we could do a teaching on yin yang, it doesn't mean opposites. It means part of the same, the oneness. Like you have two sides of a coin, the heads and the tail. You can't just have a coin with two heads. It wouldn't be a coin. Mm-hmm. And so we're not trying to eliminate the inner child. We're not trying to get rid of the inner child. We're trying to teach it that there is a third way, the Wu Wei, where I can acknowledge you and we can come together as a team and we can find our way through these challenges, because we will get through these challenges. Again, you hear me say, those of you who listen to my meditations, this too will pass. How can I say that? Because it's always passed. Listen, I'm aware of all the trials. Can you even remember all the difficulties, all the challenges you had last year, the year before that? You've come through it. But what we're offering is a Wu Wei to come through it with grace, with ease, with authenticity, demonstrating the real person you are, not showing your inner child scared, frightened, locking away, closing the door. I always remember my child when she was young, when things didn't go her way, she would storm off upstairs and lock herself in the bedroom. And that's her inner child, believing that if they kick off, have a temper tantrum, somehow the world will be the way that they want them to be. Of course, it never will. And so therefore, it's always striving.
And so this is where we almost visualize this kind of the wise inner Shen part of us being the calm, steadfast, consistent, compassionate parent, guiding parent to our inner child. So as you say, we're not aiming to get rid of the inner child or eliminate it, but we're trying to rebalance things such that every decision we make, every action we take, whether it's non-action, whether it's pausing rather than reacting, is led by that wise inner knowing Shen side of us. And that over time, when we switch into this new kind of role, this new balance, our inner child will begin to trust us. It's when the inner child, our ego, doesn't trust us to handle things in a calm way. But over time, we earn that trust, and then it becomes a harmonious partnership. But with the Shen part of us, the spiritual part of us, that wise knowing part of us, being at the kind of helm of the ship.
Yeah, and this is really why we do the teachings, because we're always talking about the same thing, but it's getting that wording right. Because what you've just explained there is very important. The word I would use of bringing the Shen and the inner child is to integrate them, is they become the Wu Wei all together. Here's the paradox. Now, at the beginning, the inner child will not want that, because the inner child is very right, wrong, yes, no, it's my way or the highway, it's got to be the way I want it. And here's the paradox. Because the inner child has direct access to the emotions, it will create an emotion of fear, anxiety. When you then surrender to anxiety and the inner child gets its own way, here comes bigger problems, because now the inner child doesn't know what to do, doesn't know how to get out of this. So you've given it the driving seat and the inner child can't drive. And then there's another thing, which is very paradoxical. The inner child then, as you said, loses trust in you. Now it can't rely on you because it sees you surrender, crumble. Now it's like left on its own. Now then is when it uses words like, I can't cope, because on its own, it can't cope. It needs that integration, that team working together. So it's its own worst enemy. And this is why when we're doing these teachings, when I'm writing my blogs, it's so difficult to put into words because it's paradoxical. When it wants something, and when it wants it, it's like, I always think about something like the child wants chocolate. You can see this in supermarkets. Go down the chocolate aisle and you see the children, I want one more, crying, maybe rolling on the floor. Then if you give it more chocolate and it's sick, who does it blame? It's your fault. You shouldn't have given me so much chocolate. And there's the paradox. So if we do not reparent the child correctly and the child takes superiority and it doesn't work, then the child almost likes it because now it's got someone to blame. It blames you. You're not good enough. You can't cope. You're weak. You're unworthy. I've got you wrapped around my little finger. But then I'm in control. Oh my goodness, I can't cope.
Yeah.
And so here's the paradox, that in these videos, we try our best, hopefully, to understand the complexities of this paradox.
And so, David, ultimately, when we encounter a challenging situation, if we experience red light emotions, we need to question what are the thoughts or beliefs behind these emotions. And if we find that, this is a thought or belief that's coming from my inner child or my ego, it's a fear-based thing, then we know that we have a choice. We can switch to being guided by our wise, authentic self, which is more calm, which is more balanced, which has more perspective, which is more rational. And then we just remind ourselves that we need to gently take the reins on this rather than allowing our inner child or our ego to guide it. And equally, so that's the kind of internal self-check we have to do. But equally, if we find ourselves experiencing red light emotions because we're worried what other people think of us, or that they're going to criticize us, or they're going to judge us, again, we need to have that self-check and affirm to ourselves that being authentic, doing the thing that is true to me and my true authentic values is more important than what other people think of me. And again, so then we have to switch tracks again, rather than going down the inner child ego route, which is, I'm just going to do whatever they want to please them, to avoid getting criticized. We have to make, almost until it becomes a default, we have to make these conscious decisions to switch tracks back to our authenticity, back to our spirituality, back to our wise inner self.
And that's why I came up with the idea of a contract. We have a contract, and whether we honour that contract or we don't honour that contract. And so, as you just quite excellently explained, when we are making and living our life from an emotional base, just that concept doesn't make sense, because if you agree that we create our emotions, so number one, the first step, the launch pad, is the belief. Number two is the emotions that belief creates. So if you live from an emotional base, you are living at step two. You're ignoring step one. And that's why when we demonstrate the golden thread, is to always go back to step one. What do I believe? Why do I believe it? And there's the contract. What do I believe? So you could say, I believe what my mother and father says, They are God. They are always right. I cannot challenge them. They have the wisdom of whoever. And whatever they told me when I was 6, I have to now live my... No, you wouldn't say that, would you? You just wouldn't say it. So what the inner child does is very clever. It then jumps to the emotion. It says, oh, let's not talk about that. Then you dishonor your contract.
Yeah, because if you don't question it, if you don't switch the tracks, then you're living your life according to your parents' values and rules.
That's right.
And they may not have even been in their authenticity.
Who knows?
So that's where it gets really perverse. Ultimately, we have one life, we have one golden opportunity to have this human experience. And if we can live it through the lens of our Shen and our authenticity, it is ultimately far more enriching for us and far more of a positive experience.
And again, that's why we do these life lessons videos. That's why I do my blogs. That's why we do the meditations, to give you the tools. Because your parents may not have even understood this. And they, as Alex just said, they may be living from step 2, from their emotions. And they brought you up from their emotions. Or what's more likely, they're repeating how they were brought up. And so this is how it travels down the timelines. And so you can see this yourself. If you had a difficult parent, a mother or a father or both, look at your grandparents and imagine what it was like for them. And this is what we try and do on these videos. This is now the time to break that chain. And how you break the chain is by being accountable, taking responsibility, understanding. And that's why we try and simplify it. And if you go away with one thing today, is the teaching, you are the creator of your emotions. You cannot be the victim of them if you create them. And so if you experience any resistance on that as you listen to this, then you can do the golden thread, because that's the inner child talking. The inner child doesn't want you to believe that, because that's how it's been controlling you. So right now, as you listen to this, and if you go, I don't know whether that's right, no, you just switch off the video and say, right, if I don't create my emotions, how does the emotion get into my body? And I've got clients who seriously think, well, they float through the air. They come down people's eyes. They're on the voice. They're on the vibration of their words. And then just expand that. How does that work? And that's the core. You have to get to that core, because to get to that core, you can then communicate with your little one. And please, if I just finish with this, please do not fall into the trap that many of my clients do. Your little one, the inner child, is not a monster. Is not a monster. It is not the devil. I'm going to repeat. It's not the devil sitting on your shoulder. It's you. It's part of you that's been stuck, that's frozen, that so badly, when it creates an emotion, a fear, anxiety, for me, when I'm working with a client, I see this child of 6, 7, 8 screaming, crying, yearning to be helped. And of course, when you try and help it, like all children, it will push you away. It will say, oh, don't you? And you have to find a way around that. You have to find a way to see this goodness. And I believe this inner child, like you, is awesome, is amazing. And it's just missing a piece of the jigsaw that hopefully we can give it.
Wonderful. Thank you, David. And I will put a link in our show notes to our Shen video teaching playlist, which has lots more long form teachings on there about living authentically, what the Shen is, how you balance the Shen with the inner child and the ego. So that will really help you with the subject. Next week, David is doing a new beautiful guided meditation on the topic we've talked about today, how to be authentic and connected to your spirituality. So do tune in for that. If you have enjoyed this teaching, please also subscribe to David's Substack blog. It's free to subscribe, and I will put a link in the show notes. And if you'd like to work with David one-to-one on any of the issues we've talked about today, David works with clients all over the world via Zoom video call. So do check out the link in the show notes to learn more about David's sessions. And finally, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We produce new long-form videos every Saturday, as well as 2 midweek short snippets of wisdom for you to enjoy. So don't forget to subscribe. We look forward to sharing with you again very soon. Bye-bye.